Thank you, President Andrea. Today's guest speaker is Sara Eskrich, and she's the Executive Director of the Democracy Found. She's a graduate of UW-Madison and holds a Master's of Public Affairs from the Robert M. La Follette School and Master's of Public Health from the University of Wisconsin School of Medicine and Public Health. She previously served as Madison Metropolitan Sewerage District Commissioner, and she served on the Madison Common Council. Sara is going to share more about her work at Democracy Found, which focuses on building support for and implementation of electoral political innovation in Wisconsin and across the country. We look forward to your presentation, Sara, and we have made a contribution to the Rotary International Polio Plus Fund as a way to say thank you for speaking with us today. I want to mention that if time allows at the end for questions, please be sure to wait for the microphone to ask your short question. So thank you, and please join me in welcoming Sara to the podium. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. And thank you all for having me today. It's so nice to be here. I've been a guest at Rotary before, and it's always a pleasure, so thank you. There are a lot of friendly faces in the room, so I won't tell too much of my own personal story of how I got into this work, but many of you know me from my role in politics. As an elected official here in the city of Madison, I'd been deeply involved in politics, both partisan politics and local politics. Also deeply involved in policy work. My professional career for the past 10 years has been in health policy. So politics and policy were both incredibly important to me. And I'd gotten to a point where I was pretty frustrated by both of those trajectories, right? And they're so dependent on one another. And it felt like we couldn't get good policy done because of politics, right? And politics was getting in, it was like this never-ending cycle of challenge and frustration. So I felt this great aha moment when I first read the work that I'm going to tell you a little bit about here today. Maybe. Click. Yeah, okay. Did you click, Jane? Okay, I'll say click. That'll work. So I read this report from Catherine Gale and Michael Porter from Harvard Business School, and it explained so much of the frustration that I had felt in both politics and in policy work of the inability to get anything done. And it resonated with me deeply, and it's completely nonpartisan work. So I'm excited to tell you a little bit about that work today and what we're doing to implement that work here in Wisconsin. So let me start with a Venn diagram that is, you'll see, non-intersecting. So here's the problem in a very simple way in politics right now that I think will resonate with many of you. And that is to say, if you are an elected official, there is virtually no intersection between acting in the public interest and the likelihood of you getting reelected. And that's a problem, right? That's a deeply problematic place to be in our politics. So I would venture a guess to say that many of you last week when you were at Thanksgiving with your families probably had some version of the Washington, D.C. is broken conversation over your Thanksgiving dinner table, right? We say it all the time, that Washington, D.C. is broken, or you avoided it like the plague. Some of you are like, I did not talk about politics, right? Why would I ever talk about politics with my family? But, right, I mean, because it brings up all of these challenging conversations and frustrations from people, right? And so we either avoid the conversation entirely or we complain about our politics, but we don't fundamentally think it's going to change. And so what I want to do today is kind of counter that narrative. I want to assert to you that Washington isn't actually broken. In fact, it's working exactly how it's designed to work. And we're getting exactly the results that we should get if we look at the system and how the system is designed. Because ultimately, if politics, if we think about it not as government and public service, but politics as an industry, it's a thriving industry, right? There are so many consultants and ads, and we're in never-ending campaign cycles. It's a powerful and profitable industry. And what we can also, I think, agree is that it's a lost and broken industry that's not producing those public interest results that we'd all like to see. So by looking at politics as an industry and understanding the way that the system is aligned, it can illustrate for us some new leverage points of where we might have the ability to transform it and make it work better to give us results that might work in the public interest. So I'm going to show you at a very high level the analysis that Gale and Porter used in their Harvard Business School report. So for any of you that went to business school, you might be familiar with Michael Porter's 5 forces analysis. It is a seminal standard that was used in many, many industries to look at how industries function. So at the heart of any industry, there are rivals, there are competitors. And in our politics industry, the key takeaway from this report and analysis is that our politics operates as a duopoly, right? There are 2 dominant competitors in the politics industry. That is the Republican Party and their industry allies, and the Democratic Party and their industry allies. 2 sides. The second key takeaway I want to share with you from the report is that customer power in this industry has been misplaced. So right now, in any business, you prioritize your most profitable customers, right? Those that bring you the most value in your industry. And in politics, it's no different. In politics, politicians prioritize their most profitable customers. But the currency in politics, in the politics industry, is votes and money. So the 2 most powerful consumers are not those of us who are just general election voters, right? The most profitable customers are actually partisan primary voters, the most reliable voters, and special interests who bring money into the industry. And there's actually been research in 2014 from Princeton and Northwestern University that validates this finding about how customer power is misplaced in the politics industry. And I'm going to quote their sad findings for you because as a policy person, this is the one that really gets to me. They found, when they examined congressional action on 1,179 policy issues, is, and I quote, that when the preferences of economic elites and the stands of organized interest groups are controlled for, the preferences of the average American appear to have a minuscule, near zero, statistically insignificant impact on public policy. All right? That is depressing, especially as someone who cares deeply about policy. So that validates, right? Customer power misplaced. That's not where customer power should lie. Third takeaway from the analysis, and I'll encourage you to read the full analysis for much more detail, but I'm trying to move quickly here for sake of time. The third takeaway is that barriers to entry in the politics industry are extreme. Right? So in any other industry that's as thriving as politics, where there's such high levels of dissatisfaction, right? Congress's approval rating never really goes above 20%. In any other industry with that level of dissatisfaction and the amount of money in the industry, you would see a new competitor in that industry, right? An entrepreneur would come in and say, this looks like a profitable industry. Let me come in and try to see if I can better serve those customers' interests. But we don't see that in the politics industry, and that's because of these barriers to entry that are so extreme. And the barriers to entry in politics industry are manufactured. And the most troubling piece is that those barriers to entry are manufactured by the duopoly itself, by those 2 major parties and their industry allies. So one example of a manufactured barrier to entry and how it prevents new competition is that the duopoly created fundraising rules that allow a single donor, so pull out your checkbook, you can write a check for $847,500 every year to either major political party. You could give to both, $1.6 million annually to the 2 major political parties. But if you want to give to an independent candidate or committee, you can only give $5,400 every 2 years. That's 313 times the amount of money, right? And we know that to enter a market, you need some startup capital. And if that's the imbalance in the startup capital, you can see just again, one example of why those barriers to entry are so high. So ultimately, what I'm trying to demonstrate with these examples is that the rules of the game, right, rules in any industry, in any system, dictate the way games are played and dictate the results that we get from that game. You can change the rules in basketball and move a three-point line and you get way more three-point shoots. I'm not a basketball person, but right, you can change the rules of games and you get different results. I shouldn't use sports metaphors. It's never a good idea. But ultimately, what I'm trying to demonstrate is that we can change the rules in politics and also get different results. And ultimately, again, what I'm going to assert to you here today is that it starts with how we vote. Because in politics, as an industry, the most important incentive as an elected official is to get reelected, right? It's how you keep doing your job, is getting reelected. You can't do any of the great stuff that you might want to do as an elected official unless you're able to get reelected. So that's what matters. And there are two fundamental challenges with how we vote, and they create this additional problem that I'll demonstrate with another non-intersecting Venn diagram. And the structural challenge here is that we don't have results in our political system and we don't have accountability in our political system. So the reason, or one of the reasons that we don't have results when it comes to elections and voting design is the way in which we run our partisan primaries. So let me just tell you a quick story about partisan primaries. So back in 2009, when Joe Biden was elected vice president, his Senate seat in the state of Delaware was up. It was open. And Mike Castle was the most popular politician in the state of Delaware. Everyone thought that Mike Castle would be the next the next senator from the state of Delaware. Mike Castle ran in his Republican primary and he lost. But shouldn't be a problem, right? He's the most popular politician in his state. Everyone loves him. He should just go put his name on the ballot in the general election as an independent, and he would certainly win because he was the most popular politician in the state. His low turnout partisan primary shouldn't have stopped him from winning, right? But there's this kind of crazy law in the state of Delaware back in 2009 that we call the sore loser law. And what that law says is that if you run in your party primary, either Democrat or Republican, and you lose, you're not allowed to put your name on the general election ballot as an independent in November. Sounds kind of crazy, right? Like a little bit undemocratic, in fact. So a natural question you might be asking yourself is how many states have some sort of crazy law like the sore loser law? And the answer is 44. And we're sitting in one today, right? So again, these manufactured rules make it so that you cannot have new competition in this industry of politics. So back to partisan primaries and results. So what I want to assert to you is that partisan primaries are really selection processes for private organizations, right? For private political parties. And that could be problematic, but the problem I want to kind of bring to your attention is not the problem that they cause in elections and in the primary system, which we're all quite familiar with, right? When we go into that general election ballot and we see these two candidates and they feel like they're so far extreme in one direction or the other because of that partisan primary, and we're frustrated because we don't feel like we've got a good choice to make, that's a problem. But I will tell you that that problem goes even further than just the problem in the election booth for us, because it goes into how politicians govern. Because any question that you might ask yourself as an elected official, particularly on really difficult, challenging issues at the national level, think about our most complicated problems as a country. A natural question you might want to ask yourself, if you're assessing some sort of compromise legislation on immigration, the debt, healthcare, right? Any of our really complicated issues. You might think politicians would ask themselves, is this a good policy? Or even, is this a policy that the majority of my constituents would support? But actually, the most important question to politicians, the question they have to ask themselves, is will I make it back through my partisan primary if I vote for this compromise legislation? And the answer is virtually always no, right? Because they will be threatened with a primary. whether or they'll have a primary if they vote on that compromise legislation, either from their right if they're a Republican or from the left if they're a Democrat. So it changes the calculus on results in governing, that partisan primary structure. So that's why we don't get results. And let me go to accountability. Accountability is, and I'm going to tell you about plurality voting, which is a wonky term, a wonky way of saying something we don't think about very often at all in our electoral system. But in our system, in the way in which we elect people, you can get elected in a three-way race with only 34% of the vote, meaning 66% of the electorate actually preferred someone else. So that's a little weird in a country that presumably favors majority rule, but what it really does is it makes it so that we don't have elections that look that way, right? We don't have three-way races. We don't have new competition in the politics industry because if you are a third-party candidate, an independent, even a different Republican or Democrat who might not have made it through on that partisan primary ballot, you are not going to put your name on that general election ballot because you become a spoiler in that election, right? You're going to spoil. You can't vote in 2016 for Jill Stein because you'll take votes away from Hillary and you'll inadvertently elect Donald Trump. Or you can't vote for Gary Johnson in 2016, the Libertarian, because you'll take votes away from Trump and you'll inadvertently elect Hillary Clinton, right? So plurality voting actually stifles any new competition or new entrants into the system. Because even if you're not going to spoil the election, you're certainly going to be a wasted vote in that election and no one's going to vote for you. So people don't even put their name on the ballot because that's the calculus that you're looking at when you're looking to get elected. So what can we do about this, right? We've got these two major structural problems that make it so that there's no real results or accountability from elected officials. So I want to propose to you the solution on elections reforms. So I'm going to talk about two major reforms to the way in which we vote today. The first is a top four primary. What that is it's a nonpartisan primary. Essentially, you go in for that primary election, and instead of having to choose whether you want to vote in the Democratic primary election or the Republican primary election, you get one ballot. All of the candidates are on that same ballot, and you pick your favorite candidate. Regardless of party, they have got a party affiliation after their name, but in the sheriff's race, you might vote for the Republican candidate. In the governor's race, you might vote for the Democratic candidate. You pick the candidate who you actually like the best out of that primary. The top four candidates move forward to the general election. What that does is it eliminates the eye of the needle problem that the partisan primary currently creates for us, right? You no longer have that calculus of never making it back through that partisan primary because you probably, as an elected official, if you've voted on that compromise legislation that the majority of your constituents actually want you to vote yes on, you'll probably make it back through your partisan primary because you're the incumbent, you're popular, you've done a bunch of other things that people care about. So your calculus has changed, right? Your political calculus and your electoral calculus has changed. So you pair the top four primary with ranked choice voting in the general election. And I did put on your tables a couple ranked choice voting ballot examples because this is new, and a couple examples if anyone wants to try it. You can say who you think the first, second, third, and fourth best teams are in Wisconsin sports. Again, I'm using sports metaphors, dangerous. But it just shows how simple it is, right? In life, we have preferences. We have preferences for who we want, number one, and we think, well, if I can't have chocolate ice cream, then I guess I'll have chocolate peanut butter ice cream, but I definitely don't want strawberry ice cream, right? We make choices in our life all the time. So ranked choice voting allows you to make those same choices of ranking when you go into the electoral booth. So you vote for your favorite candidate. And if you can't have that candidate, you get to say who your second choice is, your third, fourth, and fifth choice, or your third and fourth choice. And then in the counting of a ranked choice voting election, you count all the first place votes. And if someone gets a true majority, that is over 50% of the vote, they win. Election's over, they've got the true support majority of their constituents. If no one gets over 50%, you drop the last candidate, and anyone who voted for that candidate who came in last now has their second place vote counted, and you run the results again. It's essentially a series of runoff elections, but rather than having to come back time and time again, you cast all your votes at once. What that does is it allows people to vote for the candidate that they actually prefer, and it allows the elected official to see if there's something like an issue that really matters to people that maybe isn't making it into the priority conversation or calculus. It brings that issue to light. So let me show you, yes, there we go, how this changes, right, that original Venn diagram problem of the fact that politicians can't act in the public interest and still get reelected. Now, with top 4 primaries, we already said, right? If you're an elected official and you're doing your job well, you'll probably make it back through that top 4 primary. And then in the general election, you can win with a coalition of first and second place votes, meaning even if you maybe alienated some small constituency, but you're overall still representing your constituents well and they still like you, you can create that coalition of 50% support to win. So it makes it so that elected officials changes their calculus because they now owe their election to a broader group of voters, and they're incented to be responsive to their entire districts rather than that small swath of partisan primary voters and special interests. And the existing incentives for scorched earth campaigning is actually reduced. In Maine, where they've implemented ranked choice voting, they saw elected officials campaign collaboratively. Can you imagine actually saying, how crazy is this? But I like Andrea and I like Sara. I mean, I'll take your number 1 vote, but if you don't want to vote for me for number 1, at least if you're going to vote for Andrea for number 1, vote for me for number 2, right? Changes that differentiation between candidates to actual differentiation on issues and takes away some of that impetus to just burn bridges and totally scorch your opponent because you only have one other opponent. The most important change, though, that this does when we think about politics as an industry and we go back to that underlying industry structure is that it removes those high barriers to entry for new competition in the industry. It makes it much easier for healthy competition that can serve the public interest to be possible in elections again. So what we have, what we're doing here in Wisconsin at Democracy Found is that we're launching a campaign on top 4 primaries and ranked choice voting because every state, this is where we have these fantastic laboratories of democracy at the state level, every state determines its own electoral rules. We decide how we want to elect our elected officials. So all we have to do to implement this, all we have to do is change the state statutes, right? And change the way that we elect our representatives. And at Democracy Found, we've created a really, I have to say, impressive coalition of cross-partisan people. We've got people who hosted a Trump fundraiser in their house, and we've got the largest progressive funder in the state who have come together and said, we don't agree on anything, right, from a policy position or from politician perspective, but we agree that the system needs to change such that we can get results in governing again. So our unique coalition is working in the state capitol right now to try to gather support, mostly by raising awareness. So I'm out talking about this as much as possible, particularly in rooms like this one, where we have civic and community and business leaders. Many of you who have, I'm sure, probably made the very rational decision to not engage very much in politics, right? Because it seems totally dysfunctional and not a place where there's much leverage for you to do anything. So what I'm hoping that I've shown you at least a little bit today, and encourage you to go to our website, democracyfound.org, to learn more about, is that there is a place where there's leverage and there is a real difference that can be made when we go below the politicians, below the policy issues, to the actual system itself and how it's designed such that we can again expect some results from our elected officials. So I don't want to say to you that this is a silver bullet, right? democracy is messy and hard and complicated, and it will remain messy and hard and complicated even if we pass these top 4 primaries and ranked choice voting here in Wisconsin. But it will make a difference. It will make a difference because even if 5 states changed the way they sent their elected officials to Washington, D.C., they changed those incentives, we would have 10 senators who were elected under different rules of the game and under different incentives. And that creates a fulcrum, right? Enough of a group to actually change the political calculus and make it possible again in governing that we could maybe compromise, right? That dreaded word in politics, and get some work done that we all care about. Make progress incrementally through compromise. I think it's something that we all do in our daily life all the time, and we should be able to expect that from our politicians again. So thank you for letting me come and speak with you today. I'm really appreciative of the opportunity, and I'd love to talk more with any of you who are interested in learning more and getting involved in our work. Thank you.
Oh, here's a microphone. Okay, we have time for 1 or 2 questions. Please.
Hopefully more than one.
I'll stick around to answer questions up front, too.
Okay. Sarah, are there state constitutional barriers to enacting this, or is it merely legislative?
Good question, Mark. No, it's merely legislative here in Wisconsin. Our state constitution has no barriers that would prevent us from changing the statutes. We're working on a bill right now that would make the changes.
Right here.
Ma'am, isn't term limits a more simpler solution?
I appreciate the question, and I get it fairly regularly. So let me tell you, in the analysis that I shared, right, that's very deep and complex, there's another Venn diagram. So bear with me. I'm going to give you another Venn diagram of powerful and achievable. And so any reform that we're proposing, these 2 reforms, they have to be at the intersection of powerful and achievable. So term limits, though they may be powerful reforms, some would say with some unintended consequences potentially. So there's dialogue about whether or not term limits are the best solution, but they're less achievable because there are some constitutional questions about how you can implement term limits. So we believe that this system of healthy competition would get at the same challenge, it's the same problem that term limits is trying to solve, but in a way that is achievable constitutionally at the state level, and in fact, maybe more powerful, because there is also an argument to say that, again, if we think about industries, in an industry with dysfunction, often the people really do matter, right? And having people who are experts. So if you're just changing too often, you might just get different people in the same system with the same incentives without any expertise, and that could be a bigger recipe for disaster. So I won't go into the deep, there's a lot of arguments that you could have about term limits, but that's why they're not in the strategy that we're pursuing here in Wisconsin. Warren, one more.
Speaking of power, if you're looking at 2 parties, how would they perceive what you're proposing to be a threat to them and their power? And then how would you convince them that they're not giving up power by doing that?
It's a very good question, and I won't deny that when we talk to audiences, the most skeptical are partisans, right? The most skeptical people are people who are long-term partisans or members of political parties, because this does change the calculus for them in a way that's more complicated. So they are, I should have said, but some states have started to implement ranked choice voting, and one of the opponents in some of those states has been political parties. What I would say to the political parties, and what I do say to the political parties when talking to them about why they should support this, is that political parties right now in the partisan primary system, they have to accept whoever makes it out of the partisan primary, right? So they have some power on who they might endorse, but they might also get a candidate out of that partisan primary that they don't actually want. And so in some ways, this could give power again, takes away some power, but maybe creates an opportunity for some new power, to give parties a stronger role in who they endorse and who they support in campaigns, such that their endorsement might matter more when you go into that ballot box. Because there's, again, I could be a wonky political person and tell you that from a policy perspective, there's a lot of political scientists who will tell you strong parties are really good for our country, and there's something to say for that. And I think strong parties could be really good, but I think strong parties need to be held accountable by the threat of new competition, because right now they're not being held accountable for results that matter to us. They're only being held accountable for winning elections and not delivering results. So that's what I say to political parties. Thank you.
Sara, thank you for that presentation, and we are adjourned.